Anyway, the committee meets today to consider the nomination of, and this is one of the rare times when you have three witnesses, all three, everybody knows. There's not, to my knowledge, there's no opposition to anyone. That doesn't happen very often. So we start off with the Honorable Matt Donovan to be the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. Jordan Gillis to be Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, and Victor Mercado to be the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plan, and Capabilities. Now, all of these, it took a while. I'll have to blame the White House on this. I can't blame anyone else, but it took forever to get the information that we needed in order to make, and you did make it, Mr. Mercado. We were going to wait for you. All right. Anyway, Mr. Donovan, you will be introduced by Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Robert Wilkie, and we thank Secretary Wilkie for being here. Mr. Donovan, we also welcome your daughter, Air Force Second Lieutenant Kelsey Hefner. Now, have her, I want the hands to go up when I, nobody's here? Oh, there you are. Yeah, all right, good. And your son, Matthew Donovan II, and your son-in-law, First Air Force First Lieutenant Cameron Hefner. Welcome, all of you here. Mr. Gillis, I understand that Senator Perdue will be introducing you this morning. I also welcome your wife, Mrs. Leigh Ann Gillis. And Mr. Mercado, I understand that your family is overseas and unable to join you as well, but I'm glad you made it. I'm pleased to have three such accomplished public servants for this committee today. Each of you is a lifetime volunteer. Each of you volunteered to serve your country as a member of the armed forces. Each of you volunteered to serve the administration as a senior leader in the Department of Defense, and each of you has volunteered yet again to appear today to be before the committee for confirmation. Mr. Donovan, you have served as the Undersecretary of the Air Force, as acting Secretary prior to the confirmation of Secretary Barrett. Prior to your civilian service, you served in the Air Force as a command pilot and rose to the grade of colonel. And we can't forget your service as a policy director with this committee. Mr. Gillis, as an Army officer, you earned the Bronze Star and the Purple Heart in the 2006 Iraqi deployment, after which you joined the management consulting firm of Scott Madden, where you became Director of Energy Practice. In October of 17, you were appointed as Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment. Mr. Mercado, after a distinguished career in key command and staff positions, you retired in 2018 as a Rear Admiral. Since that time, you have served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Plans in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. I speak for the committee when I say we appreciate your willingness to appear before us. Now, you have to have the required questions, and all three of you, if you vocally respond, I'd appreciate it very much. Have you adhered to the applicable laws and regulations governing the conflict of interest?
Yes. Yes.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with the deadlines established for requested communications, including questions for the record in hearings?
Yes.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to the congressional requests?
Yes.
Will those witnesses be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes. Yes.
Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify upon request for this committee?
Yes. Yes.
And do you agree to provide documents, including copies of electric forms of communications in a timely manner when requested by a duly constituted committee, or to consult with the committee regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such documents?
Yes. Yes.
Have you assumed any duties or undertaken any actions which would appear to presume an outcome of a confirmation process?
No.
Do you have to tell, I don't have to tell the three of you that the world today is in the most dangerous position. So far this year, the committee has focused to ensuring that DOD has the authorities and the resources it needs to implement the National Defense Strategy. This is this document here that we talked about during the course of every meeting we've had, probably the last 2 years. Further, the committee has been working for more than a year on privatized housing. It was a crisis that has directly impacted family morale, readiness, retention, and health. As senior leaders in the Department of Defense today, and in the positions for which you have been nominated, you have and would continue to play key roles both in winning the great power competition and in taking care of our people. We look forward to hearing for your views on these and other important issues. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me join you in welcoming the Honorable Matthew Donovan, William Jordan Gillis, and Mr. Victor Mercado to this morning's hearing. I also want to join you in recognizing their families. Thank you for their service, because they serve along with you. Secretary Donovan, your nomination is welcome. The Department has not had a Senate-confirmed Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness since Secretary Wilkie, to your right, departed in July of 2018. With the wide range of the responsibilities of this office, it's imperative that we fill this position as soon as possible. If you are confirmed, you will face many challenges in ensuring, first and foremost, that our military has adequate numbers of ready and trained service members of sufficiently high character and talent to meet national defense needs. You will also be responsible for military and civilian personnel policy, military family and child care programs, and the DOD-run school system. Most importantly, at this moment, you will be working with the military services to ensure the health and welfare of the force in the face of the coronavirus outbreak, especially those stationed overseas. Secretary Donovan is currently the Undersecretary of the Air Force, but we know him well owing to his tenure on the Senate Armed Services Committee as a staffer for Senator McCain and Senator Inhofe. We thank you for that service. I also trust that his prior career has prepared him well to take on these challenges. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Mr. Gillis, if confirmed, you would become the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment at a critical period for military families who are still struggling with a broken privatized housing system. You would assume the role of Chief Housing Officer for the Defense Department and would be responsible for implementing over 30 housing provisions in the FY20 National Defense Authorization Act. It is imperative that these provisions are implemented fully and properly to restore trust and give our military families the housing they deserve. Also related to the safety of our military installations, the FY20 NDAA included several new requirements that will shore up climate-related and weather-related vulnerabilities in order to improve military installations' resilience. New requirements to use forward-looking projections in the planning and design of military construction projects will ensure taxpayer dollars are well spent on facilities that must last at least 40 or 50 years into the future. If confirmed, Mr. Gillis, I look forward to working with you to ensure these military construction guidelines are put into place and are effective. Mr. Mercado, you have been nominated to serve as the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities. This is an important position that oversees the national defense strategy, as well as the development of global defense posture and the review of campaign and contingency plans. As you acknowledged in your opening statement, if confirmed, you will be instrumental in reinvigorating the plans review process and guiding the capability development and force management processes. As you may know, Section 1708 of the fiscal year 2020 National Defense Authorization Act included a requirement for the Department of Defense to provide a report to Congress on the Department's implementation of the National Defense Strategy, as well as conducting 2 independent studies on the development of joint operational concepts. I believe this report will provide tremendous value to senior political and military leaders, and if confirmed, I trust that you will make this reporting requirement a priority. In addition, the committee is concerned about the atrophy of analytical capabilities within the Department of Defense to support force development and planning processes. I would welcome your thoughts and actions you will pursue, if confirmed, to strengthen analytical capability and expertise within the Department. I again thank the nominees, and I look forward to the testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Secretary Wilkie, we thank you for being here to introduce Mr. Donovan, and you are recognized for that purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Reid, and thank you, distinguished members of this committee. I will say it is a treat being in front of you for the first time and not asking for your vote. But it is good to be back, and it is a great honor for me to introduce my friend, Matt Donovan. Before I talk about Matt, I want to echo what Senator Reid and the chairman said about the importance of this job. I believe that the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness is the most important position within the Office of the Secretary of Defense. It is about the readiness of over 2 million active and reserve forces, but it also includes everything from shipbuilding to trying to figure out the pilot pipeline and the needs that we have there. It also oversees 700,000 Department of Defense civilians. To put that in perspective, I am responsible for the second largest department in the federal government. We have 400,000 employees. The department that Matt will be entering, 700,000 civilians alone. But more importantly, it is at the crossroads of a cultural change that many on this committee have been tackling. When my father and Senator Reid wore the red beret of the All-American Division many years ago, only 11% of the force had families, and that was confined to officers and senior enlisted. The force today comprises 80% of those in uniform with families. That is a cultural change that we are still getting our arms around. And as a result, the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness is responsible for defense health, the commissaries, the PX, and the schools, and making sure that when our forces train and they are deployed, when they come back, the families have been taken care of. Now, that is why there is no better person in this town or in our community to hold this position than Matt Donovan. Fighter pilot, commander, someone who by the time he was 25 had probably made more life-altering decisions than most Americans make in a lifetime, and someone who grew up with his family on all of the far-flung outposts of the United States Air Force. Experience in the private sector, but more importantly, as the Undersecretary of the Air Force, the only member of those civilian secretariats at Army, Navy, and Air Force who actually had operational responsibilities. But more importantly, he knows this committee and has the confidence of the men and women who work with you and those whom you serve. He stood side by side with our late friend, Senator McCain, who had the utmost confidence in him to the point where when General Mattis was being considered for Secretary of Defense, Senator McCain said, if you need anything answered about the Air Force, see Matt Donovan. More importantly, in these times, he is an uncommonly congenial American, someone who has not only faced adversity in the skies, but has managed two of the most complicated offices in the Department of Defense. And he has stepped forward to a position that Secretary Gates once wrote about in his book as being the dysfunctional family picnic. Under Matt Donovan, you will never have to worry about that ever happening again. So my testament is that the Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness, that office cannot be in better hands. It is my honor to recommend to you a warrior, patriot, and a son of the United States Air Force. Nobody will do a better job. And Mr. Chairman and Senator Reid, as always, I thank you for your many courtesies to me.
Well, and we both thank you very much for your many courtesies and for your introduction this morning. I think Mr. Gillis will be introduced by Senator Perdue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reid, and all my colleagues on the committee for allowing me to introduce my good friend and fellow Georgian, Mr. Jordan Gillis. Today, Jordan is joined by his wife, Leanne. I have known Jordan and Leanne a good part of my adult life, and I'm honored to be here supporting him today. I'm disappointed, though, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Reid, that their children, unfortunately, are not here. They're in school taking exams. Thomas, of course, is the light of the world, and then Ann Bedford is training to be President of the United States today, so they are watching on TV, I'm sure, from their classroom. Jordan Gillis is an excellent choice to serve as Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment. Throughout his career in the public and private sector, Jordan has an impressive track record in management and organization of major operations. On top of that, Jordan has always put service to his country before himself or his family. After graduating from Duke University, Jordan joined the United States Army, where he was stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia. After leaving Fort Stewart, Jordan worked in management at a major industrial supplier in Atlanta, in the real world. One thing to know about Jordan is that he's a workhorse who never stops pursuing excellence. While working full-time in management, Jordan also earned his MBA from Emory University. As our country's enemies threatened our national security, Jordan was not content to simply sit on the sidelines. He signed up again. He was deployed to Iraq as a captain and was later awarded the Bronze Star Medal and the Purple Heart for his selfless service. He then rotated out as a major from the United States Army. For 10 years after his time in Iraq, Jordan worked as a director of Scott Madden Management Consulting, where he provided critical advice to some of the biggest energy companies in the country. 2017, Jordan once again took the call of duty, this time as a civilian, when he was appointed to be the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment. During his time there, he also assumed the duties of Acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Installations, Energy, and Environment for over a year. Jordan likes to say he had a full head of hair before he came to Washington, and I think we all can relate to that. I've only just scratched the surface of why Jordan Gillis is an excellent choice to serve as Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment. He is an expert in management, operations, and logistics with a keen eye for detail. He understands how to get things done through other people. He is a dedicated public servant. In this new role, Jordan will ensure that our military equipment and materiel is reliably built and maintained so that we can face any threat around the world. He will make our country safer and stronger. Once again, thank you to all my colleagues in this committee for the high honor of introducing my friend Jordan Gillis to you today. I'm glad that the committee now has an opportunity to get to know just a little bit about this man, as I have come to learn in the last 2 decades. He's an exceptional public servant. I know this man, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. I know his family. He is a soldier, a dedicated patriot, and he'll be an exceptional Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, Senator Perdue. An excellent introduction. We'll begin with opening statements now. I think all of you know the drill, that your entire statement will be made a part of the record, so don't feel like you have to go longer than you have to go. So we'll start with you, Secretary Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for your long-standing and unwavering support for the Department of Defense and for the men and women who defend our great nation. I also thank Secretary Wilkie for his leadership and his kind words here today. If confirmed, it will be my great honor to assist Secretary Esper in leading the DOD's nearly 3 million active Guard and Reserve service members and civilians as the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. I thank President Trump and Secretary Esper for their confidence in me and for this humbling opportunity to continue in service to our nation. As you mentioned, Chairman, I am joined today by my daughter, Air Force Second Lieutenant Kelsey Hefner, an Intelligence Integration Officer at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. My son, Matthew Donovan II, an aviation management major and a pilot as a junior at Auburn University in Alabama. And my son-in-law, Air Force First Lieutenant Cameron Hefner, a pilot also stationed at Offutt Air Force Base. These young people, and thousands just like them, are the reason I appear before you today. They represent all of America's sons and daughters, many of whom continue to raise their right hands and volunteer to serve their country during a time of war. Our nation faces an array of threats from near-peer competitors we have not seen in decades, not since the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. At the same time, the character of warfare has evolved, where grave threats now appear in previously unknown or uncontested domains, such as cyber and space. To successfully meet these threats, the Department of Defense must also evolve. We must attract and retain people with the right skills to prevail in this environment, properly manage them and meet their expectations using 21st century talent management practices, and ensure all are always treated with dignity and respect. We must also provide them the cutting-edge tools of the trade they need to be successful and state-of-the-art training technologies and techniques to best hone their skills. Our total force soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and civilians deserve the best leadership, the best policies, the best equipment, the best education and training. And our service members and their families deserve the best health care, best support systems, and best quality of life we can possibly provide for the sacrifices we ask them to endure. If confirmed, it will be my honor to work every day with Secretary Esper and the millions of men and women of the Department of Defense and the Congress to ensure your Department of Defense sustains the ability to defend and deter, and if necessary, defeat our nation's adversaries. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Secretary Donovan. Mr. Mercado?
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Reed, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. Up front, I would like to thank the President for nominating me and Secretary Esper for his trust and confidence in recommending me for this extraordinary opportunity to continue to serve. Unfortunately, my family is on the West Coast or on travel and could not be here today, although they very much wanted to be present, although I think they're watching this being streamed. For the record, I want to thank my wife, Suzanne, who allowed me to fail too quickly in retirement after 35 years in the Navy and continue to serve in the Department of Defense, now as a civilian. She and our two children, Dan, who just completed 10 years in the Navy as a naval aviator and is moving on to a new chapter, and Melinda, who just joined the Los Angeles Angel City Chorale, get full credit for all that I have been privileged and back in the DOD. I also want to acknowledge my mom and dad. My father enlisted in the Navy in the Philippines, retiring as a Master Chief in the 70s. My mother was an educator. They brought their family to the U.S., became naturalized citizens, and I was born in Virginia while my father was stationed in Norfolk. What I am today, I owe to them and my sisters, Helen, Elsie, Christine, brother Erwin, and my dear in-laws and friends. It did take a village in my case. As for the Assistant Secretary of Defense position that I have been nominated for, I have been incredibly fortunate to have been associated with this organization for the past year in varying capacities, and I have had a front row seat to its relevance in developing and implementing the National Defense Strategy, reinvigorating the plans review process, and guiding the capability development and force management processes, working alongside the professionals in the services, Joint Staff, and the combatant commands. If confirmed, it would truly be a high honor to lead this high-performing organization, and I pledge my very, very best efforts to advance our national objectives during these consequential times. Finally, I would like to say that my time working as a legislative fellow supporting this committee back in 2000 was one of the highlights of my career ashore. I fully understand, appreciate, and thank you for the important work that you do on behalf of our men and women in uniform, our civilians and their families. I am grateful for your consideration of my nomination, and I welcome your questions. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Mercado. Mr. Gillis? By the way, I think I'll share something you might not have time to share, and that is we barely got your stuff in time. I think we had 3 minutes to spare last night. I'm glad we got there, and I'm glad you're here this morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. That was cause of some significant anxiety on my part, but thank you, Chairman Inhofe, Ranking Member Reed, distinguished members of the committee. It is a great privilege to appear before you as you consider my nomination for Assistant Secretary of Defense for sustainment. And thank you, Senator Perdue, for your kind introduction. I'd also like to thank the President for nominating me, and Secretary Esper and Undersecretary Lord for their confidence in me and for providing the support of their talented staff throughout this process. I'm humbled and truly grateful to have the opportunity to continue to serve the nation. I'd like to acknowledge my wife, Leanne, who is here with me today and who has supported me always, but especially through my deployment to Iraq while she was pregnant with our first child. And our children, Ann Bedford and Thomas, both are in school today, but they serve as my daily reminder why we maintain institutions like the military and bodies like this. And if they are watching on their phones, they need to stop that and get back to class. I finally want to thank the Army, which awarded me a Pentagon internship when I was a cadet 25 years ago. which provided me with my first awareness of the opportunities to serve the nation as a civilian. One of the most formative experiences of my life was my military service in uniform, which carried on a family tradition of servant leadership. It was an honor to come back to the Army to serve as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Installations, Energy, and Environment. That has given me great insight into a significant portion of the Assistant Secretary of Defense sustainment portfolio. And more importantly, it clearly reminded me why we're here. Specifically and simply, it's to support the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, family members, and civilians of the military. It is to enable the warfighters to carry out the department's mission to fight and win the nation's wars. I hold them in the highest regard. Therefore, this is a task and an obligation that I take very seriously. To that end, Secretary Esper has outlined clear priorities for the department, and Undersecretary Lord has operationalized those for her portfolio. If confirmed, I will do my utmost to support these leaders and the nation we serve together. We have sustainment decisions to make that have far-reaching long-term impacts, and we also have obligations to service members and families that need to be met now. I am specifically aware of critical issues involving PFAS, privatized housing, material readiness, logistics reform, installation resilience, and the organic industrial base, among others, that we need to give our persistent effort and attention to. I'm ready to begin addressing these immediately. If confirmed, I pledge to work with Congress, the services, industry, and other stakeholders to enhance quality of life and improve and sustain military readiness. Neither the importance nor the demands of this position are lost on me, and I will dedicate myself fully to it. Thank you again. I look forward to your questions.
So thank you, Mr. Gillis. Now, to try to set an example, I'm going to attempt to have a question for each one of you that I think is probably the most significant area of your potential service here, and try to do that within our time frame. And you don't need to start so early. There it is. Starting with Mr. Donovan, you're right. In your statement, you said we must recruit and retain. That's the biggest issue out there. I mean, right now it's complicated by the fact that we have a great economy, and so we're competing with an economy at the same time. So I see two problems out there. First of all, the studies indicate that only about 29% of today's youth and the population are eligible for military service. Now, that's a huge problem. That's not a problem we've had before. And in addition to that, you have the problems then of the competition out there in the market. So how are you going to address that problem, Mr. Donovan?
Well, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, and I have seen those same studies as well. I think it's a problem that extends beyond the Department of Defense, and it is a national issue. I recall when I was a kid in elementary school and we had the presidential fitness program, and there was a lot of funding for sports activities and that sort of thing. So I think that all feeds in, and then when you combine that with the increased use of smartphones and video games and that sort of things, I think kids are not getting the physical activity that they need to help prepare them for the rigors of military duty. That said, I don't think that we're really having that much problem yet recruiting the kind of people that we need. We're generally filling the recruiting roles, but as we look towards the future, as we look towards the imperatives of the National Defense Strategy, then we're seeing that we're going to need to attract those skills that are in so much demand on the outside as well. A good example is cyber. That I spoke with Senator Rounds. So we're trying to partner with universities, we're trying to partner with industries even to see if there's some way that we can share the load on this, but it's an excellent question.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Gillis, we have another problem there on the Tenant Bill of Rights. When it came out, it left out two things, the dispute resolution and the ability to withhold rent. Now, when that was initially sent out to the tenants around, those are the two things that were very significant to them. So my question would be, number one, why are they left out? And number two, what's the best way to communicate that?
Yes, sir. So, I take that whole issue very seriously. I was principal deputy at the Army when we became aware of what was happening with privatized housing, so I'm personally aware that those are very important to tenants. I think we left those out because we got hung up on details, but I assure you that even from my position now in the Army, that we are going to work through those. The acting Assistant Secretary in this role now committed to trying to do that by May 1st. If confirmed, I will carry that on. If not confirmed, I will continue to work on it from the Army perspective, because
That's great.
important.
Appreciate that. Mr. Mercado, we know that the NDS, this document here, is about more than just how many planes, ships, and tanks, but also that we buy, but also about making sure our forces can be in the right place at the right time. And that's what this, our Secretary Esper is trying to do right now. Now, in doing this, I want to single out AFRICOM and the fact that if you take all of our comms, PACOM and CENTCOM and EUCOM, that adds up to about 250,000 troops. 250,000 troops. All of AFRICOM is only 6,000 troops, and of that, 4,000 of those are in Djibouti. So that services other areas too. So I would say that that has to be the most understaffed command that we have. And so, and asking the question would be, I would want to ensure, as you look at what is happening in that part of the world, that we are aware of the fact that we have problems in West Africa with only about 1,000 troops there in total in West Africa, and that I don't think it would be a good move to actually, during that effort by the Secretary of Defense, to actually even consider reducing that small number in West Africa. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, sir. Understand, and Africa is a challenge. We know China is very interested in Africa, not only the base they established in Djibouti, but we know they're interested in the west side, like Cape Verde, Equatorial New Guinea, to kind of bridge and get both sides access to each side of Africa. People equate the reviews that we're doing too much to downsizing when it's more about right-sizing. When we reviewed the tasks that AFRICOM has been asked to do over 10 years, we find out that they are a number of 1,700 tasks. So over the years, they have been unburdened. So we need to go back and look at the critical missions they do, from train, advise, and equip, great power competition, and dealing with those violent extremist organizations that are intent to harm U.S. and the homeland, and make sure we get their presence right.
Excellent response. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, when you responded to the Chairman's questions about responding to the committee, it was unqualified yes, but in your APQ responses, you said consistent with the Constitution and statutory obligations of the executive branch. So could you clarify it? Is it an unqualified yes that you will cooperate with the committee? And I think, and Secretary Donovan, you understand this, we typically ask, I think, fairly judicious questions, and we keep the information in close hold. So is it yes or maybe yes?
Unqualified, yes.
Mr. Mercado?
Sir, unqualified yes.
Yes, sir.
Gillis.
Unqualified, yes.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Secretary Donovan, one of the big issues we're all facing is the coronavirus, and within the Department of Defense, you will be the point person. Could you give us a sense right now of where the department is with respect to the risk and the safety aspects of this virus?
Yes, Senator Reid, and I'll let you know that the DOD's top priority is the health and safety of all our service members and civilians and their families across the world. So I was in the performing the duties of role of personnel readiness from December 28th until March 2nd. And during that time, we were very engaged. In fact, I issued 3 different sets of force health protection guidance that started going out in the middle of January. It first started following the Health and Human Services lead and CDC criteria, as well as working with the Department of State when it was first appeared in China. But the COVID-19 task force, that is the national task force led by the Vice President, we are represented on that by the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. And then underneath that, the P&R role is our Health Affairs Assistant Secretary, who is coordinating efforts for medical countermeasures, for developing vaccines across our laboratories, across DOD, and also working on the testing laboratories that we have to get them all certified. So we've been quite involved in this, and will continue to be.
Just a very quick response, if I could. Have we been planning to assist the general public, private hospitals, state healthcare systems? Does DOD have a contingency plan? And very quickly.
Well, we actually always support through the Commander of the United States Northern Command, General O'Shaughnessy, through defense support to civil authorities, so we are prepared to do that.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Gillis, let me re-emphasize the point the Chairman made about the Tenant Bill of Rights. My sense, not my sense, but my conviction is that those are legislative statutory provisions that, regardless of being in or out of the Bill of Rights, are enforceable and you must enforce. Do you concur?
Sir, I do, and I can commit that we'll make those happen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gillis. Mr. Mercado, you have a very complicated responsibility, and one perception I have is that the technological gap has reversed in the last decade. We're behind in places we used to be far ahead. And in order to get from legacy systems with incremental improvements and expensive improvements at that, we've got to sort of rethink all this, and that's going to come down into your responsibility. Using simulation, gaming, and operational exercises, we have to leap over to new technologies, many of them autonomous or virtual, et cetera. Just a quick comment on what you see.
Yes, sir. We've taken the first step. When Secretary Esper came into as a Secretary of Defense, he directed the development of a joint warfighting concept. You mentioned it as a joint operational concept. This is something we had not had. We had services that had their individual concepts, but nothing to bring it together, and nothing that looks downstream 10 years to say, how would we fight a potential adversary 10 years from now based on the force we will have, the force that we may project to have, some of these technologies that may be available, may be affordable or not. So once we do that, what the Secretary's directed, and my, if confirmed, I will be part of overseeing that effort with CAPE and others, is to have and it should be developed by the military. So the chairman and the Joint Staff should lead it, but all the services and all the analytic capability that they have to be able to look at different concepts, then war game them, do some experimentation. War gaming is important because you cannot, leadership, you have to factor leadership decisions, different leaders in that environment. So it's very complex, and we're going to start with the most stressing cases that we have and look at others as we develop this concept.
And just final point, I think not just wargaming, but actually operationally in the field, trying new techniques.
Yes, sir.
Trying and failing is probably the best way to ultimately succeed. Thank you all very much.
Senator
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Gillis, we'll go ahead and start with you. As you know, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment is charged to ensure the effectiveness, the efficiency, economy, and performance of the DLA. And in this role, you would be accountable for DLA's mission performance and for ensuring that DLA is responsive to our services requirements. It is one of the largest agencies within the DOD with over 26,000 employees and a budget of nearly $40 billion. So much of the DLA's services is in direct support of the respective military services, all of whom also employ their own logistics agencies and activities. So while DLA is well suited for centralized work such as logistics, IT support, there might be some inefficiencies or redundancies when it comes to the storage and distribution networks that are tailored more specifically for each of our services. So in this capacity, will you commit to taking a hard look at ways to expedite mission success, including whether certain logistics functions are better suited to DLA or those respective military services?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely will. So DLA's first mission is to deliver warfighting readiness, and we'll ensure that they do that the best way possible, or that it is done the best way possible, whether that's through DLA or through the services.
Very good. And will you look for ways to gain efficiencies and cost savings?
Yes, ma'am.
In that capacity. Thank you. I really do support those efforts to get rid of wasteful spending in order to direct resources towards our NDS implementation. That is very important to many of us. So we know there is a lot of technology that is available out there in order to help us gain efficiencies. And just for example, the private sector employs AI-enabled vehicles in their storage centers that can identify and categorize items, things of that nature. So looking to the future to find those efficiencies. Thank you very much for your commitment. I appreciate it. Mr. Mercado, thank you for your service in the United States Navy and your continued service to our nation. Let's talk a little bit about coronavirus. Obviously, it's something that all of us are very, very concerned about. It's been threatening the health and safety of our troops and their families that are stationed overseas. The outbreak also impacts readiness, posing threats to our troops' interoperability with allies and partners. And we've postponed joint exercises in South Korea, for example, and we cut short an exercise with Israel. And our ally Finland pulled their troops out of an Arctic exercise called Response 20. So these exercises with some of our closest allies occur in critical areas related to our great power competition. So how, as an Assistant Secretary of Defense, how would you factor in biological threats when crafting contingency plans?
Well, Senator, first today, there are pandemic plans on the shelf, and NORTHCOM is working through that now. And also each combatant command also has supporting plans that they use first and foremost for health protection of the force, and also any resources they have to support, civilian authorities, lead federal agencies or partners, as well as conducting mission, because they have to factor all those, and that's what they take into consideration for the plans. I would say that for a complete plan, as you say, there are a number of factors from cyber to space, as well as chem-bio annexes, and those have to be developed and have to be vetted and reviewed up at OSD.
Oh, thank you. And does the global force posture take into account the possibility of scaled down or paused joint exercises?
I think it does. We're concerned about readiness and being able to work with our partners. It takes a lot of effort to work with each of our partners as well. It builds relationships. So I think the combatant commanders, they are monitoring this carefully and assessing the risk and see how they can mitigate that.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that. And one thing that we don't often talk enough about is the biological threats that exist out there. We focus very heavily on nuclear and otherwise, but I am glad to know that that is something that you would take into account. So my time is expiring. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary Donovan, Mr. Gillis, Mr. Mercado. Thank you all for being here today and for your willingness to serve. I want to start with you, Secretary Donovan. After all, you grew up in Peterborough, New Hampshire, so that makes you a Granite Stater still. And I want to thank you for joining us when we received the first KC-46 tanker at Pease last year. I hope we're going to see our entire allotment and that they will be flying soon as refueling tankers, but that's a topic we won't get to today. Last month, DOD released a report that outlined major changes to beneficiaries of 50 military treatment facilities. That report was required by the 2017 NDAA, and it raises real questions. We've gotten a number of questions in our office because one of the facilities that is scheduled to be closed is the Naval Branch Health Clinic at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and it's part of as many as 200,000 TRICARE beneficiaries who will no longer be seen at those 37 military health clinics across the country. So can you talk about how you see this getting implemented in a way that is as least disruptive to the people TRICARE is trying to serve as possible?
Yes, thank you, Senator. We're reforming the military health system to do two things. One is to increase the readiness, the medical readiness of our force. And the second is to increase the readiness of our medical force. Our medical professionals have to have currency in order to do this. So under this concept, some beneficiaries may move downtown. Some may take years to move downtown, depending on the capacity of the network they're doing, and some may never move. But one thing I want to tell you that our #1 guiding principle is no beneficiary is going to go without access to high-quality health care. That's our driving direction on that. So we're looking at each one of these military medical treatment facilities, and as you saw in the Section 703 report, which was very in detail, and we won't move forward with any implementation until we do an assessment of the local market and make sure that they can handle the additional workload.
Well, thank you. I think particularly right now as we're dealing with the coronavirus, that's a consideration. I wish Secretary Wilkie were still here, because I hope you will talk to the VA about some of the lessons learned and the struggles that they are still having with trying to transition some of our veterans into the private healthcare market and the challenges that presents. Mr. Gillis, I want to raise the concern about PFAS with you. I was very pleased that Secretary Esper, on the day he was sworn in, created a PFAS task force. I understand that you're going to be leading that. Is that correct?
It is, yes, ma'am.
As you know, that's a challenge at more than 400 of our military installations. One of the first identified was the former Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire, where 1,500 people have already tested positive for PFAS in their blood. So I wonder if you could share your thoughts with us on how you see addressing that, because I think that's a huge challenge, not just for the military, but for the private sector as well.
Yes, ma'am. So I completely agree that it's a nationwide problem, but where DOD was the source, it remains a DOD obligation to make it right, whether that's cleanup or providing water treatment or alternate sources of water. I commit to look at that, if confirmed, across all of DOD, to continue to lead that task force and to get resolution, which includes working with the Navy Research Lab, who is finding a alternative firefighting foam that does not contain PFAS.
Yes, I had the opportunity to ask about that, and nobody's been able to quite give me an answer about where we are in that development. So I hope you will follow up with that.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mercado, you were talking with Senator Reid about the considerations around future warfare and the thinking that's being done. And certainly, as we've seen what's happening with Russia and China, those are huge challenges that we face. But I would argue that equally critical, as we look at recent events, has been hybrid warfare and information warfare, where we don't seem to be as adept as our opponents are in that. Can you talk about whether you're also looking at those two issues as you're thinking about future war games and what we need to be doing?
Yes, Senator. I think the hybrid warfare activities in the gray zone are where we are tested often. And so we see in the Pacific, where I was before, from the South China Sea ops and all the other activities. My concern is, say, for example, in the Arctic, if we don't act and we don't check some of those activities, then we could be faced with something like the South China Sea fait accompli. So all the commanders look at that, develop their ROEs, as well as strategies to address that.
I hope, I'm out of time, but I hope that you will share some of those with this committee at a date in the recent future.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and being willing to serve. And kind of poison the well sometimes, these committees. I look forward to supporting your nomination, but I do have some questions. The first one I have for you, Mr. Donovan. First, thank you for the work you've done. Thank you for the time in my office recently and some things that you've already proven that you're focused on addressing problems, so I appreciate the work that you've done. I want to talk about the 1st Raider Battalion move, MARSOC Marines, down to Camp Lejeune. We've completed the first phase, I think, in 2019. The second and third phases will be complete by 2022. When that was first being deliberated, I think some of the Marines expressed concerns about quality of life issues, spouse employment, the services that they were accustomed to getting in California, and how that was going to be fulfilled when they moved to Camp Lejeune. Can you first give me an idea of how the first phase is going, whether or not we're listening to the Marines and their family members, and how that may be how that may impact the subsequent phases, what work we have left to do.
Well, Senator Tillis, thank you for that question. And let me start by saying that Secretary Esper is all in on taking care of our families and our service members. In fact, the NDS has the 3 line of efforts that are listed in there. He's added a 4th line of effort of taking care of service members and their families. So we're moving out and following his direction. For example, child care. He just issued a child care policy memo to give military members priority for their children in child care facilities that we have to help reduce some wait list issues. Spouse employment is very important to him, so we've done a lot of work with spouse licensure reciprocity between states, and to make sure that they can get back to work quickly when they move so often, as a lot of our military families do. So it's a very big priority for the Secretary.
Do you know if anything specifically has been done for the population that's already made the move, and kind of a satisfaction survey or anything, getting feedback? I think that we've got the right priorities, but this particular population, they have an interesting mission and challenges that all service members have. But are we doing any specific soundings to know how well we're doing with this transition?
I'm not familiar with that, Senator, but I'd be glad to get back to you on that.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. Let's talk a little bit about the case for moving families every 3 to 4 years versus 5 years. What's the case for the moves every 3 to 4 versus a 5-year cycle, where some of these other issues I'm talking about with the Raider Battalion are experienced by everybody that's got that churn and that mobility?
It's one of the things that we're taking a look at, Senator. In fact, Secretary Esper has also asked me to take a look at being able to extend time on station for our military members and their families to provide more stability. It becomes a retention and a retention issue to keep people in a stable area, especially when they have kids that are going to school and all those different issues. So if confirmed, I will definitely look into that at the direction of the Secretary.
Thank you very much. And this question is probably for, well, actually, the first question is for Mr. Gillis, and then maybe a follow-up if time permits. Mr. Gillis, we're moving forward with the Defense Personal Property Program. You know that the IG was not very complimentary of, at least from the onset, moving to the new program, where I think we're going to do selection and have a contract. It had more to do, I think, with the current administration of the program having its deficiencies, but also some question about the justification for moving to the new program. So I'm curious, with the size and complexity of it, I don't think it would it gets contracted this year. I don't think it would affect PCSs before next year. Are you familiar with this program?
Sir, I have passing familiarity with it in my current portfolio. It is not part of it, but I'm aware of it, and I was moved by the DOD to Virginia, and so I've been the subject of the current program.
Well, we need to get it right, because the current, like military housing, that I won't have time to talk about, but like military housing, I do think that if we have the right measures, the right contract mechanisms, that we could see a positive improvement here, maybe a reduction in cost, improvement in service levels. But I'd just like to get your commitment, after you're confirmed, to come into my office. I'd like to get some insight into the final selection process and the contracting, to make sure that once we implement, it's going to be a net positive for the military families.
Yes, sir. If confirmed, I'd be happy to come back to you on that.
Thank you all. Mr. Mercado, I ran out of time, but I look forward to supporting your nomination as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of the nominees for their service. One of the things that was interesting in hearing you talk about your own lives in the introductions were that your families have served, parents and yourselves and your children. And we often talk about the current status of a military where 1% of people serve and 99% of people don't. But the 1% is not just a single generation either. It's just so common to see families like yours where the tradition is a multi-generation tradition, and that's inspiring. Mr. Mercado, let me start with you. Your own history is a great one. The history of Filipinos fighting with the U.S. military and Filipino Americans fighting in the U.S. military is just an amazing history. And you mentioned that you were born in Norfolk. We're really proud of our Filipino-American community in Hampton Roads and the contributions they made, especially to the Navy. I want to ask you about this in terms of plans and strategies. One of the things that troubles me a little bit, or just is a concern, is that using China as an example, they've had a great opportunity to learn how the U.S. fights from watching how we have fought in the last 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. We haven't had the same opportunity to necessarily learn how they fight. We see things they're doing, platforms they're building, island building in the South China Sea, but they've really had the opportunity to school on us as they're thinking about plans. We haven't had quite the same opportunity with them. So how do you approach a challenge like that in what will be probably the most significant state competitor that we'll have for the next decades?
Senator, one of the points in the National Defense Strategy is we are better than China. We can win if we have to, but our advantage is it's shrinking. It's getting smaller. So part of anything we buy or any new tactics, techniques, procedures we do, we have to safeguard it. And so back when I was in the Pacific Fleet, whenever you are testing new technology or new tactics, the direction was it had to be approved by the 4-star. So it goes back to the culture where we were during the Cold War. When we build systems, we have to look into how to protect those new technologies, new capabilities, to be able to train to those because hypersonics is going to challenge us, and how do we train to those as well? So it's a complete review of how we field capability, from concealing any advantage that we develop to preserving that and being able to train with it.
One observation I would offer as well is that our way of fighting, it includes building coalitions. We fight with other nations, we fight with NATO. China and Russia haven't necessarily had that same strategy of allies, but you are now seeing China and Russia do joint military exercises, China, Russia, and Iran doing joint naval exercises. So as we're doing our own plans, we're often planning what we would do together with allies. I think increasingly it's going to be the case with adversaries that they will be doing the same thing. Mr. Donovan, just a suggestion based on my discussions with Virginians as I'm out around talking to our state, very heavy military state. One thing that I hear a lot about is the need for better and better cooperation between the defense health infrastructure and the VA. So, the easy transfer of medical records, it becomes hard for a veteran to assemble the DOD medical records, and then put it into a form where the VA can make prompt decisions about things like disability determinations, et cetera. And so I would just encourage you, should you be confirmed, and you no doubt will be, that in the part of your portfolio that's the defense health, I think there's an awful lot more can be done with VA. In Hampton Roads, for example, I often hear about, there's a VA hospital and a great naval hospital, Portsmouth, 15 miles as the crow flies, a little bit longer by road. There are different specialists at each that could, easily come over and do office hours, come over to the VA or go over to the Naval Hospital, but things like credentialing in the two systems sometimes make that challenging. I think we can serve all of our people better if that is cooperative. So I would just encourage you in that way. And then, Mr. Gillis, one last thing with you. I want to give you an opportunity to brag. So tell us about something in your current position that you have felt good about in the energy and environment space. So you have energy, environment, installations, but talk about work that you've done in the energy and environment space in your current position.
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to, and I think they're also good examples of the kinds of things that I would then encourage, if confirmed, across DOD. So one of the things we focused on in the Army is increasing energy and water resilience at our installations. And I think we have a couple of really good success stories. Fort Knox is nearly 100% energy resilient, and I think the approach there is something that we would look to replicate across the department. And then on the environment side, I think we've worked very well with the Department of Interior, and the Department of Defense has been an incredibly good steward of natural resources, to the extent that some of the habitat that we maintain has enabled recovery or near recovery of some endangered species. And so working with DOI, I think we're going to be able to downlist from endangered some of the key species that we find on military installations.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donovan, I'm going to share some suggestions. I've met recently with our veteran service organizations. The number one thing that I hear most frequently is the faulty handoff between the Department of Defense and the VA. Suicides, the data is that suicides of veterans are most likely to take place in the first year to 3 years after they leave active duty. I believe that the Department of Defense should put as much time, effort, and money into transition out as they do to recruitment in. This is a really serious problem, and I hope that you will really pay some attention to this, because I hear this everywhere I go in Maine from individual veterans and veterans organizations. Second, and you sort of alluded to this, in terms of recruitment, and we've got new kinds of soldiers. Cyber warriors don't need to have to do 100 push-ups. And I think there needs to be not a degradation of standards, but a recognition of what it is that we need, what qualities do we need in certain jobs, so that for example, the physical requirements perhaps aren't going to be the same for somebody that's going to be, whose fighting is done at a computer screen. So I hope that's a consideration. And finally, geographical recruitment. There's not much. There's been a loss of contact in New England or in the Northeast between the public and the military. We've lost a lot of bases. There are really no major bases, and it would be a danger to the country if the military was essentially a regional force. And I hope those are three things that you might take a look at.
Yes, sir, and thank you for that. And the collaboration with the VA is about the best I've ever seen. It probably doesn't help that I know Secretary Wilkie very well. I mean, it doesn't hurt that I know him that well. And we meet biweekly. We also co-chair a joint executive committee between the DOD and the VA. I co-chair with the Deputy Secretary of the VA. So, and all those issues you mentioned are on our agenda to work through.
And I want to associate myself with Senator Tillis's. I think a 5-year rotation makes a lot more sense, at least in many situations, than 3-year. It would save billions of dollars, aggravation to the families, and I think actually you'd have a greater buildup of knowledge and expertise. Mr. Gillis, this is a question for the record. I would like to know, if the alarm bell sounded tonight, what percentage of our military hardware would be ready to go? How many ships could go to sea? How many airplanes could fly? How many brigades would be ready to deploy? And in as much granularity as you can provide. In other words, not just overall Air Force, but helicopters, fighter planes, transportation, refueling. And again, this is for the record, but I think that would be important for us to know, how we're doing in this area. And frankly, I want to see it compared to the private sector. How does readiness in the Air Force compare to United Airlines, or how does readiness in the Navy compare to private sector ship transportation? Question of sustaining the F-35. Do we do life cycle cost analysis when we're acquiring a new weapon system?
Sir, I believe that we do, and if I'm confirmed, that's life cycle cost is one of the concepts that I would push across all weapon systems and installation sustainment.
Well, I know that the Secretary of the Air Force is focused on this, but the sustainment cost of the F-35 is right now prohibitive, and that's got to be driven down. I hope that that's a priority in your work.
Sir, I agree. I believe that has a negative impact on readiness, and if confirmed, I would commit to make that a priority.
Mr. Mercado, Admiral Mercado, is there a contingency plan in process for what happens if the deal in Afghanistan with the Taliban doesn't work?
Sir, that is not in my direct portfolio, but I understand it is conditions-based. So if confirmed, what I offer to you is to get together with my colleague from the ASD from Indo-Asia Pacific and give you the answer you deserve, because it's a very, very important question. But my understanding is, again, we start to draw down within 135 days to 8,600, and then after that, it is conditions-based, contingent on a political solution.
Well, I hope that we hold to that, because it would be tragic if we ended up in exactly the same place we were in 2001, with the Taliban providing a safe haven to our adversaries.
Yes, sir. I understand it is reversible, and I commanded a destroyer after 9/11, joining Carl Vinson with John C. Stennis Strike Group, supporting our Marines in Afghanistan. So I am very passionate about that as well, sir.
I just hope that that was a Bath-built destroyer, but we'll ask that for there. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you for your service and for your attention this morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donovan, let me start with you. The hospital at Fort Leonard Wood in my home state of Missouri is continuing to suffer from staffing shortages. We've been assured that these shortages will be filled this coming summer, but I'd like to hear this from you directly. Can you assure me and the people of my state that the hospital at Fort Leonard Wood will have the staffing it needs on the timeline that has been promised?
Well, Senator, I certainly can promise that if confirmed, I will make sure that that all staffing across the entire DOD has been problematic, and part of it is sometimes the civilian hiring processes take too long, and we end up losing good prospects to private industry as well too. So we're working to reduce the time to hire and all that. The Army, I understand, has been working diligently to make the pay levels comparable as well too, in order to attract those people. So.
Very good, thank you. I'll hold you to that and look forward, I hope, to working with you on it. Mr. Mercado, let me come to you. Let's talk a little bit about the European Deterrence Initiative. You wrote in your advanced policy questions that initiative, EDI, has, I'm quoting you now, contributed greatly to correcting posture problems in Europe. Can you just say a word about how that's been the case in your view, why that's been the case?
One of the things that sticks out to me, Senator, is the pre-positioning of certain equipment that we need for that theater. So looking at the success in bringing that to fruition to adjust our posture in Europe, I think that was definitely a positive in EDI.
You've also written that the United States needs to focus similarly on improving its posture in the Indo-Pacific, which I completely agree with. And let me just ask you this. If EDI has been so successful in Europe, why not try something like that in Indo-PACOM?
Yes, sir, and I'm mindful I owe you a follow-up on my response to you on the letter you sent to Secretary Esper. So we are doing a complete review of our Pacific posture and taking into consideration lessons learned from EDI. There are some differences without NATO in the Pacific, but we have treaty allies. We have territories. It is a maritime theater. Like I said, I think there are advantages, and we need to look at it and take those lessons learned, and I'll work with my colleagues. I owe the Secretary a recommendation. I owe you follow-up on the letter I sent you on that review, and it is ongoing right now because following the plans review in the Pacific, equally important is to make sure we have the right posture to compete and also to follow on our contingency plans.
Just thinking for a second back to the European example, I've heard it argued by some that a Pacific deterrence initiative, if you like, may actually discourage allied investment. But that's not what we've seen in Europe, is it? I mean, with EDI, what we've seen is that our dedicated funding commitments there has actually spurred allied commitments. I mean, it's actually helped improve our position across the board. Isn't that fair to say?
Sure. As I've traveled and engaged with partners and allies, I think it is a positive development with our allies.
Yeah, and I don't see any reason why it would be any different in Indo-PACOM. Mr. Mercado, let me ask you about the role of deterrence by denial in the national defense strategy. Can you speak about that, the role of deterrence by denial?
I think deterrence, when you look at the elements of deterrence, you need capability, will, and to be able to communicate it. I think, first of all, we have to do that. Deterrence by denial, as I see, is the next step, whether you have to take some aggressive action to deny an adversary an advantage. So I would go through the first tenets of deterrence to make sure that they understand we have the will and the capability, and there are consequences if they try to test us.
Do you think our force west of the date line is currently enough to deter China?
I think that the force west of the date line is there to allow us to compete. And there is friction between the ability to compete and the ability, which I think there is a deterrence value there, but we have to be agile enough to adjust if we need to prevail in a conflict.
Still thinking about the National Defense Strategy, what metrics, in your view, should Congress use to evaluate the Department's progress in implementing NDS?
We just, Senator, we just signed out our assessment. We use actually 3 things. Validity, to make sure that it is still valid, and we believe that it is. how we are implementing it, and there has been challenges as we reset the force for great power competition. The Middle East contingency is one. We may not be on the timing that we need to do to reset our force. And then we look at effectiveness. If we're competing, how are we competing, and what is China or Russia's view on that competition, and all the other aspects? Are we making the investments in developing the concepts, capabilities, plans that support our ability to compete and prevail? So those are the three metrics that we look at, and I've held State of the Strategy meetings, both external to the department and within the department, to try to get a valid assessment. And if confirmed, I will continue to do so, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donovan, I'm concerned. I know everyone in America is about COVID-19, most particularly its impact on our military readiness and our personnel abroad. Are you satisfied that military installations, specifically in South Korea and Italy, have all of the equipment that they need, whether it's protective gear, tests, and so forth?
I think, Senator, from a gear perspective, I think they're in good shape for personal protective equipment, that sort of thing. Tests, we've been slow because we've been trying to get the same tests that the CDC has been developing and implementing. And from what I understand, and I had to step out of the position on March 2nd, but when I did, the last I had heard that we were getting the tests that were starting to be distributed to the defense.
How many tests have been distributed to South Korea?
I don't know that number, sir. I'd have to get back to you on that. But I know one of the things that we've been doing is certifying our 17 labs in order to do that test. And we have 12 of the 17, and DOD certified to process the test results as well, too, which will help pick up the pace for testing.
Are the test results analyzed in South Korea and Italy, or are they sent back here?
I believe they're sent back here, sir, but I'd have to get you a definitive answer for that.
Well, this is kind of critical, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it is.
And we're talking about a real imminent danger to our troops' readiness and to their personal safety and their families.
Yes, sir. And
how can, with all due respect, how can you not know the number of tests there are in South Korea and Italy?
Well, sir, in order to comply with the Vacancy Act, I had to leave the position on March 2nd. And when I left the position on March 2nd, we were getting the tests.
How many were there then?
I don't have the exact number of tests, but I can follow up and get you that.
I would appreciate that, because I think that we're talking about, frankly, a really potentially catastrophic shortage of tests around the country. I'm not saying anything that's original or novel, well documented, certainly in Connecticut, and for that to be true also in our military installations is really pretty shocking when they are vulnerable in places like South Korea and Italy. Would you agree?
Yes, sir, I would agree that that those places are vulnerable. And as I responded to you in your letter that you sent a few weeks back, we've been issuing force health protection guidance in order to give installation commanders guidance on how to limit exposure.
I don't think I've received that response. Maybe it's in the works.
It may be in the works. I know on the day that I received the letter from you, I just issued my second supplement, force protection health guidance.
Yeah, the letter was dated February 25th, but I don't think I've received an answer.
I'll check on that, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Gillis, I was very interested in the statistic given by Mr. Wilkie that there's been a shift from our military personnel, 20% of them having families, to 80% of them having families. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, I believe it is.
And over what period of time? That's a really remarkable
number?
Sir, I'm not sure when the shift occurred, but it's been within the last decade or two.
Could you track that down and get back to us about it? I think that's a very significant shift.
Yes, sir, I will, because that has significant impact on what we provide to service members on the installation from a housing standpoint, sir.
In that connection, specifically on housing, I'm very disappointed that 3 of the tenant Bill of Rights have not been implemented, 3 out of the 18. Can you give me a timeline by when they will be implemented?
Yes, sir. So Secretary Esper communicated that in his communication to Congress that the 15 would be implemented by May 1st. The acting assistant secretary and
What about the remaining 3?
Sir, the acting assistant secretary in the role that I'm to be confirmed for committed to wrapping up those last 3 on the same timeline, May 1st, and I support that.
If there's any shift, will you commit any shift in timing? I'd like your commitment that you will get back to us.
Yes, sir, I will.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, 3 of you, for being willing to step up and take on these different responsibilities. Secretary Donovan, if confirmed, you'll be the principal advisor to the Secretary and Deputy Secretary for personnel requirements. And the interface between uniformed service members and our civilian workforce, as you said in your opening statement, is one of the key success factors of our joint force. We have a volunteer uniformed force and a civilian workforce that is better than anything in the world. I'm concerned about its aging and the 180-day rule in terms of how we fill the needs. In a low unemployment era like we are in right now, it's getting harder and harder to find those people. We have some aging workforce capabilities as well. Like one example, we have 3 major Air Force depots. One of those happens to be in my state. And 37% of the workforce in that particular depot, Robins Air Force Base, actually retires by 2023. And by 2028, 54%. Now, that's a big turnover, and that's very indicative of the other depots as well. Can you give me your personal impression of how we might use the 180-day rule, how we might amend it in this particular period of time when we are definitely going to be short qualified and trained workers in the civilian force?
And Senator, by the 180-day rule, you're talking about the time to hire?
Yes, sir.
That is one of my priorities when I was performing the duties of, but also as the Undersecretary of the Air Force, is to drive down that time it takes to hire someone into government service. Because as I mentioned to Senator Hawley, you know, people go, they need jobs, they apply for jobs, and then they wait so long they end up going to other industries, and we're all in competition for those same skills. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is drive down, simplify that, and stay within the rules of the Office of Personnel Management, but to be able to drive that down. And we are making some progress down.
You're speaking of the onboarding process?
On the onboarding process, yes, sir. So it's completely frustrating, and as you mentioned, so much of our civilian workforce is entering into retirement age, and they're going to need to be replaced with you know, fresh, young.
In your opinion, do you think we need to revise the 180-day rule?
If confirmed, I'll work with the committee and see if there's something. I'm not sure yet if that needs to be revised, but I do know that we have to work continuously on getting that time to hire reduced.
Mr. Gillis, we've had 2 questions already on housing, but we had a hearing here where the Secretary of the Army explained to us that because of the continuing resolution that was employed in October of last year, first quarter of this fiscal year, it held up 4,400 housing units on various bases across the country. As a volunteer soldier, what's your opinion about how we should look at the housing needs of a volunteer force?
Yes, sir. So typically, at least speaking from my Army perspective, what we do is look for the community first to see what they can provide in terms of housing the force. And then what we provide is the balance. So community first, military second, but from a prioritization standpoint within the military, whether it's new construction or sustainment, at least in the Army, housing is one of the things that we prioritize, because that is something that we owe to the soldiers and families of the Army. And I think that is something that, if not already in place, should apply across the department.
Mr. Mercado, one of the questions that I have is the current NDS, the shipbuilding requirement and that sort of thing. As General Mattis said, the current NDS is a refocus on China, but it's a maritime effort. Do you believe that the current allocation of the budget that we've just seen for 2021 is consistent with the NDS, and does it properly fund the military to fulfill the missions required inside the NDS?
Senator, I would go back to what Secretary Esper had said, and I think what we put in our assessment, that this budget is a good balance, but ultimately to implement the NDS effectively, we need another 3 to 5% real growth to do that effectively. But
Is that
we're
3 to 5%, I'm sorry, 3 to 5% each year for the planning period, or is that just for this 1 year, to be clear?
It's not my area. I just need to go back and review that in detail, Senator, and get back to you.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to you all for being here. Mr. Mercado, I understand that Chairman Inhofe talked with you a little bit about the NDS and AFRICOM and our importance there. As you know, that's something that I feel is very important to us and to our global force posture. So I associate my remarks, myself with his remarks. Let's talk a little bit about the JWC, because we had a good conversation about that yesterday. And if confirmed, I want you to touch on what you would do with the organizational structure, the capacity, the capability for the development of the JWC.
Senator, with regard to the joint warfighting concept, and as you know, Secretary Esper has directed that we develop it. And again, it's something that we do not have, so this will be a first. And for me, it's an all hands on deck, because you need that intellectual capacity to apply to this, because it is very challenging as we look at potential conflicts and stressing conflicts, that we need to build a force able to do it. From combining the service individual concepts to looking at technology that could be available in the future and how it interacts with the force that we have, and then test it, war game it, experiment with it, and then move on, because you cannot do it all in once. You have to look at the most challenging case in the Pacific, and then you have to look at the most challenging case in Europe, and then you have to make sure that you fill those gaps, and it takes time, and it's methodical and it's systematic, and we've started that effort.
And then I would assume that you all are going to keep us apprised as you move forward on the timeline.
Yes. I think, again, if confirmed, I will be part of overseeing that effort, and yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Senator King mentioned to you human capital as it relates to building out and meeting much of the needs with our cyber warfare and as we look at great power competition. And we would hope that you take that to heart as you look at individuals that want to serve, but maybe want to, we should consider changing our recruiting and the individuals that we are bringing in to work on these efforts. And I know Secretary Donovan, that question was directed to you. Do you want to weigh in on that for a second?
I agree, Senator, and one of the things we are doing is looking at, previous top leaders in the Department of Defense had weighed in on this, and Secretary Esper, though, is open to looking.
We understand they've weighed in, but we're seeing change come very slowly.
I agree,
and
Senator.
It all gets wrapped up in utilization of spectrum, how we handle some of our R&D. So we're going to watch it closely. Mr. Gillis, let me come to you. You've heard a good bit today on the issues of housing, and I think our conversation yesterday was fairly robust about this, and making certain that we are able to meet the guidance that is there in the NDAA. and to have a timeline. And you have said the Bill of Rights, you're firm on this date of May 1. You all are going to fix this. No can kicking. You're going to fix it.
Yes, ma'am, that's exactly what we're driving toward, and if we need any help, we will, if confirmed, I wouldn't hesitate to come and ask you for it.
Okay. Well, I think it's important that you all get pen to paper on this, that you deliver the message. We are quite frustrated that you would put out a Bill of Rights and it would eliminate those components that are so vitally necessary so that people know they can withhold that rent and they've got a path to that dispute resolution. So our attention on that is not going to be lifted. It is going to stay right there, and we appreciate your willingness to work on that in a timely manner. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for your willingness to serve, and I know a number of you have already served your nation, so appreciate that very much. I want to get a quick commitment for all of you to join me up in my state, the great state of Alaska. If you haven't been there, you need to see why Billy Mitchell referred to it as the most strategic place in the world. There's a lot going on up there, a lot of issues with regard to great power competition in the Arctic, missile defense, a whole host of issues. Can I get your commitment, all of you, to join me up there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Senator, I brought my Alaskan-born son with me again this time.
Excellent. Excellent. Great. Let me, Mr. Mercado, let me ask you, I had a discussion with the Secretary of Defense last week, and then he testified last week on the issue of the Asia Pacific and our force laydown there. This is something I've certainly had an interest in. The committee's had an interest in. More importantly, from your perspective, the Secretary has an interest in. The NDS talks about great power competition, particularly with China's pacing threat, but our force posture is rather stale out in that region, whether it's the DPRI with the Marines and other things. Can I get your commitment to work with this committee and the Secretary? It's actually mandated in last year's NDAA on a strong, hard look at how we have our forces arrayed in that region, including in my state.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any thoughts on that issue?
Sure, absolutely. I think our posture, as you noted, is the result of post-World War II, post-Korean War, and with great power competition, what we're faced, it's insufficient at this point. So as we review our plans, that to me is the #1 priority, and Secretary Esper wants to review the plan that's being developed as we speak. And also
And this committee mandated that review.
Yes, sir.
In the NDAA last year.
Yes, sir. And right behind that is to make sure that we have a posture that supports executing that plan. Now, the tension will be the posture to compete day to day and be agile enough to shift to be able to prevail should we have to in conflict.
Let me ask a related question, because they're all kind of related regions, but you know, the Pentagon has been really slow to recognize our strategic challenges in the Arctic. This committee, Congress, has been much more forward-leaning than the Pentagon. Not sure why, but I really want to get your commitment to work with this committee, with me, my team. There is an awakening of the challenges up there. It's remarkable if you look at the media. You know, there's articles almost daily about the great power competition there, and yet we are woefully, woefully under-prepared, not prepared. We have 2 icebreakers. One is broken. The Russians have 54. Heck, the Chinese have more than us. Can I get your commitment to work with us? The Secretary of the Navy last week talked about how he and the Secretary of the Air Force and Army are putting together a trilateral group to look at strategic basing, particularly in Alaska as it relates to our Arctic interests, which we just don't have any capability, particularly to execute the DOD strategy on the Arctic.
Yes, sir, you have my commitment.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, I want to mention one thing, the other area that I've taken a lot of interest in, again, that this committee's taken a lot of interest in. It's been bipartisan, which is new, because it typically hasn't been an issue that's been bipartisan over the years, is missile defense. We've been doing a significant buildup of our nation's missile defense, and again, driven by this committee in conjunction with the Pentagon. But lately, as I've mentioned in recent hearings, there's been smart people making rather dumb decisions on missile defense. I'd like to get your commitment to take a review on this readiness issue. I'll just give you an example. Part of this committee's requirements were to build an additional 20 silos, more missiles, which we need at Fort Greely. That's happening. But the undersecretary recently said, well, we haven't perfected it, so we're going to redo the bidding on the kill vehicles, which will take at least 10 to 15 years. So we're going to have 20 silos sitting empty for 10 years. And nobody in the Pentagon seems to think that's not a good idea. Can I get your commitment to work with this committee on that?
Yes, sir, if confirmed from a readiness.
Finally, I always do this with the new members, particularly for you on readiness. Have you read this book before, This Kind of War, by T.R. Fehrenbach? Any members of the? So I have additional copies. I'll get them for all of you. This is a book that talks about how we were the greatest military power in the history of the world in 1945, which we were. And in 1950, because of bad leadership in the Congress and at the Pentagon, the U.S. military had a hard time stopping a third world peasant army in the summer of 1950, the North Koreans. It's really a good book to read about readiness and how quickly you can lose it. So can I get your commitment, if I give you the book for free, that you guys will take a look and read this very important book?
Yes, sir.
This Kind of War by T.R. Fehrenbach?
Sir.
Sir, I've got a copy.
Great. Did you read it?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No quiz. Just read it. No quiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. One of the issues that this committee has really struggled to address effectively is sexual assault in the military. In fact, last year's SAPRO report showed an increase in the numbers of sexual assaults in the military, both reported and unreported, but actually the percentage of cases that went to trial and the raw number of cases that went to trial went down. And the number that ended in conviction also went down. So we're not actually going in the right direction, and issues like retaliation are still very high. Last reported about 59%, unchanged over the last few years. So one of the areas of agreement, bipartisan agreement, over the last few years was trying to increase the number of reports so that if a sexual assault occurs, that there's a reason and a safety for survivors to come forward. In fact, we even went so far as to create a provision in last year's NDAA, a safe to report policy. And even though the safe to report policy was in the NDAA fiscal year 2019, even though we passed it in the House and Senate, it was taken out in conference and a report was put there instead. So I would like to talk to you a little bit about the safe to report, because we know anecdotally that particularly in the service academies, that once the safe to report language was put in place in the Air Force Academy, for example, many more came forward. So do you agree that collateral misconduct charging in sexual assault cases has a chilling effect on a survivor's detriment, and a survivor's determination as to whether or not to report?
Yes, Senator, I think the survey results we have showed that.
Yeah. And what measures will you take to ensure survivors do not have a fear of collateral misconduct charges and retaliatory measures by command?
Well, we want to make sure that our policy reflects that, the most important thing is to take care of the victim, and we'll deal with other collateral misconduct issues in a prevention type scenario rather than after it occurs.
Thank you. And do I have your commitment that you will work with me during this NDAA process to find a strong bipartisan solution to how to reverse the trend on sexual assaults in the military?
You have my commitment, Senator, if confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Donovan, many of our service members who have served in operations all over the world are now returning with severe illnesses being attributed to burn pits. So these service members are plagued with an array of illnesses and cancers that are being attributed to a constant toxic smoke, which they not only worked in, but ate and slept in. Now they're not only fighting for their lives, but they're fighting for health care as well, because exposure to these pits was not thoroughly and accurately documented. Veterans are struggling to prove they were exposed during deployment. My question is, what will you do to ensure that the current service members are made aware of the dangers of burn pit exposure and that this exposure is accurately recorded?
And Senator, I'll work with the other undersecretaries of defense in OSD, but one of the things that, as you mentioned, has been challenging for us is the documentation of where these burn pits occurred and then which personnel were actually assigned there at the time. So I know that the staff is working hard to come up with some sort of data management system, if you will, in order to do that. And then the collaboration with the VA is very strong because they're very interested in this as our service members go out in post-service care scenarios with the VA. So we're working very hard on that.
And are you confident that the individual longitudinal exposure record will prevent future warfighters from having to face the same hurdles when they need care?
That is our hope. Yes, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Donovan, welcome. Welcome to everyone on the panel. An issue I've been working on for many years that falls under your purview is food insecurity in the military. I think we can all agree that it's essential we provide enough for our young military members to take care of themselves and their family members. In the past, DOD has been reluctant to accept or even attempt to grasp the full breadth of this issue, which led to a 2016 GAO report recommending that the department collect and analyze more complete data and work with the Department of Agriculture to do so. Other organizations like the Military Family Advisory Network have been filling in the gap with their own research. And in 2017, they found that 15% of survey respondents had trouble getting enough food for their families. They're due to release an updated, more detailed report in April, which I am looking forward to. And while I'm pleased that DOD is scheduled to release a report in the coming months on SNAP usage among service members, I'm concerned that once again, the department may be at risk of obscuring the problem. First, if this report is just on the use of SNAP benefits, it fails to capture those who tried to access SNAP but were unable to, or those who relied on some other form of food assistance. And second, and I hope I'm wrong here, but I have heard that the USDA has not been consulted by DOD in any meaningful way to help conduct this study. Mr. Donovan, what is your experience with confronting the issue of food insecurity in the military?
Senator, thank you for that. I don't have very much experience with that, but if confirmed, I'll make the commitment that I will certainly look more closely at this issue. And if it's required to go coordinate with the Department of Agriculture, I'm perfectly willing to do that.
Thank you. So will you commit to brief me on this issue once you are confirmed?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Switching gears, I'm not sure if you've been following the case of VA's handling of a reported sexual assault at the DC VA Medical Center. A ProPublica report alleges that Secretary of Veterans Affairs Robert Wilkie sought damaging information about the individual who reported the assault. Specifically, it was reported that Secretary Wilkie, who used to serve in the role that you're nominated for and who has just given you a glowing and warm introduction to this committee, may have gained access to her DOD records by asking his friends in your department to help him do that, or by encouraging others to do so in an effort to discredit and attack her character. If this alleged smear campaign involved accessing DOD information systems, one would expect there to be electronic fingerprints. At my request, the VA OIG is conducting an investigation into this alarming matter. Mr. Donovan, if confirmed, will you promise to fully cooperate with this? Will you promise to fully cooperate with this VA OIG investigation?
Yes, Senator.
This includes your personal commitment to provide investigators with complete access to DOD information systems and resources necessary to determine whether this individual's military records were viewed during the relevant time periods.
As long as it's consistent with law, yes, Senator.
And will you recuse yourself from any investigation where Mr. Wilkie has been found to either reach out to you or those that you know for personal help?
I know that Senator Wilkie has not reached out personally to me in this matter, and I'm really not aware of it. But if advised, I would recuse myself.
Thank you. And now finally, I'd like to talk about the subject of hazard pay. Current guidelines have National Guard and Reserve members held to the same standards for qualifications as their active duty counterparts, but they're only eligible for 1/30 of the hazard duty incentive pay. Our guardsmen and reservists are taking the same risk and held to the same requirements, but they aren't receiving equal compensation. So you have to fly the same number of flight hours in order to maintain your currency, but then if you only do one drill day, you only get paid 1/30th of a day's worth of incentive pay. Fortunately, some of my colleagues on the committee, Mr. Manchin, Mr. Kramer, and I have been working to right this wrong by introducing the Guard and Reserve Hazard Duty Pay Equity Act. If confirmed, Mr. Donovan, will you confirm and commit to working with us to correct this inequity so that all members of the National Guard and reserve forces, whether on active or reserve duty, can be fairly compensated when they take on the additional risk associated with hazardous duty?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
We thank all three witnesses. It's rare that we get three witnesses that are so well known by all the members up here, and we appreciate the fact that you're willing to continue your service. Any further comments, Senator Reid?
No, sir. No, sir.
All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you.